Are you nearsighted or farsighted?
Both. That's why I invented the bifocal.
All right, so there's just a little introduction there from The Office. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about what's happening in France. And if you've listened to some of my stuff before, I've talked about how Ben Franklin spends time in France during the Enlightenment. So I love that little opening there. So we are starting Module 19 here. We are looking at the beginnings of the French Revolution. So we're going to see what is going on that leads up to that ultimately. So first of all, we know the Enlightenment has been taking place here. We know, there's these great salons, these great discussions, and all these things going on. Ben Franklin goes and spends time there, and we know that Thomas Jefferson does as well. So, there's a lot of really cool things happening in France in the 1700s, but you have to consider why that is. Like, why is France the center of all of this? So if you were looking or talking to an outsider, someone who wasn't from France during this time, all they see is the great stuff. All they see is the good stuff from France. But if you were talking to the French citizens, they're going to tell you a whole different story. They're going to tell you that something isn't right. And that's why the Enlightenment takes place there. That's why people are, fighting for equality and rights and, a change in government so fiercely. It's because, there really is no freedom or rights or, a fair government in France at this time. So it all makes sense when you really look at things. But you have to understand the Enlightenment is like a facade. It's a fake front for, how things are really going in France in the 1700s. So one of our biggest contributions to the French Revolution is going to be this system of feudalism that was still used in France in the 1700s. In feudalism, you had nobles who owned vast amounts of land, and that gave them privileges, it gave them titles. So you had these nobles who owned land, and then you had people basically that worked on the land that were like peasants and everyone else who were beneath them. So feudalism, by the time we get to the late 1700s, is really kind of outdated. A lot of places around the world were no longer using it, but then there was France still using it, even though they had had all these great discussions on fairness and equality. So we know this old regime, this system of feudalism is going to be problematic. And we'll come back to this political cartoon here after a little bit. The way that this social system worked in France is that you had everybody categorized into what we called estates. So you had people in the first estate, second estate, third estate. And that's something we're going to look at more closely here. So what I like to say is you had the privileged estates. So you had some states that had all these privileges and kind of extra things. And then you had the third estate. So we know that the third estate will not be privileged. And that's something you have to consider as we go on with this.